Men are all the same. Vanessa Reed said it with a smile, but there was nothing warm about the way the words landed. Nearly 300 guests sat beneath crystal chandeliers in the Grand Meridian Ballroom, surrounded by polished silverware, champagne glasses, and giant screens carrying the logo of Reed Dynamics. Investors laughed politely. Executives exchanged knowing looks. Near the edge of the stage, Daniel Brooks kept working. He was kneeling beside an open audio panel, tightening a loose connection before the next presentation began. 41 years old. White work shirt, dark slacks, a faded wedding band still resting on his left hand. Most people in the room had passed him without noticing him. Vanessa noticed him now. "You disagree?" she asked. Daniel looked up. The microphone was still live. The ballroom quieted. "Ma'am, you heard me." A few people laughed. Vanessa stepped closer to the edge of the stage, elegant in a dark blue evening dress. Confidence sharpened by years of boardrooms where hesitation was treated like weakness. Men are all the same. Self-interest first. Promises second. Accountability somewhere near the bottom. More laughter. Daniel closed the audio panel slowly. He could have smiled. He could have nodded. He could have let the comment pass the way working people often let powerful people pass through them. Instead, he stood. "I heard you." Vanessa tilted her head, and the room leaned toward him. Daniel glanced at the microphone, then at the hundreds of faces waiting for entertainment. He understood immediately what this had become. Not a conversation, a test, maybe even a joke. "You do not have to answer," one executive called. "Probably safer." Laughter rolled across the tables. Daniel did not react. That was the first thing Vanessa noticed. No embarrassment, no anger, no desperate need to win, just quiet. The kind of quiet that made confident people suddenly wonder whether they had misjudged someone. "Well," Vanessa pressed. Daniel looked directly at her. "No, ma'am. I do not think all men are the same." Her smile tightened. "Of course you do not. But I think pain can make the same mistake look like proof." The laughter disappeared. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me." Daniel picked up his small tool case. Sometimes when people get hurt enough, they stop meeting new people. They start meeting old wounds wearing different faces. Someone near the front lowered his glass. A woman at Vanessa's table stopped smiling. Even the low hum of conversation from the rear of the ballroom seemed to vanish. Vanessa stared down at him. "Are you saying this is my fault?" "No." Daniel's voice remained even. "I am saying hurt can teach lessons that are not always true." The silence deepened. There was no triumph in his face. No smugness. That somehow made it worse. Vanessa had spent 15 years learning how to control rooms like this one. She knew how to answer hostile shareholders, aggressive reporters, arrogant competitors. But this man had not attacked her. He had simply refused to become what she expected. "And what would you know about hurt?" she asked. Daniel's fingers tightened once around the handle of his tool case. His eyes dropped briefly to the worn wedding band. Then he looked back at her. Enough not to use mine as evidence against everyone else. Something shifted in Vanessa's expression. Only for a second. Daniel nodded politely. "Your microphone is fixed." Then he turned and walked away. No applause followed him. No one laughed either. Vanessa remained beneath the chandelier light, surrounded by wealth, authority, and hundreds of people who normally agreed with whatever she said. But for the first time that evening, she was no longer thinking about the speech she had prepared. She was thinking about the quiet single father who had just corrected one of the most powerful women in the room without raising his voice. And she had no idea yet that Daniel Brooks was about to challenge something far more difficult than her opinion. He was about to challenge the story she had been telling herself for years. Daniel left the ballroom through the service corridor before the applause returned. The noise behind him softened with every step until all he could hear was the low hum of fluorescent lights and the wheels of his tool case rolling over polished tile. He checked his phone. 3 missed messages from Emma. 1 from her after-school program. He stopped walking. "Dad, do not panic. I am okay." The bus was late. Daniel exhaled slowly and typed back with one hand. "I am leaving now. Stay inside until I get there." A voice behind him said, "You always walk away after saying something like that?" Daniel turned. Vanessa stood at the end of the corridor. No microphone now, no audience, no executives laughing around her. Without the stage lights, she looked less untouchable, more tired. "I thought the event was still going," Daniel said. "It is. Then you should probably be in there. And you should probably answer my question." Daniel glanced at his watch. I need to pick up my daughter. Vanessa folded her arms. So that is your escape? No, convenient timing. Daniel's expression changed only slightly. She is 11. That stopped her. Your daughter? Yes. Where is her mother? Daniel looked down at the wedding band. She died 4 years ago. Vanessa's posture softened for half a second, then pride returned before sympathy could settle. I am sorry. Thank you. But that still does not explain why you decided to lecture me in front of my board. Daniel looked at her calmly. You asked me. You could have agreed. You did not ask for agreement. You embarrassed me. That was not my intention. Intent does not erase impact. Daniel nodded once. That is true. Vanessa seemed surprised by the lack of resistance. So you admit it. I admit you felt embarrassed. Her eyes sharpened. There is a difference. There usually is. Silence filled the corridor. Somewhere behind the wall, dishes clinked and a service cart squeaked. Vanessa studied him as if he were a problem that refused to fit inside a spreadsheet. What do you do here exactly? She asked. Facilities systems. You fix microphones? Among other things. And you are comfortable speaking to the chief executive officer that way? Daniel lifted his tool case. I speak to people the same way whether their name is on the building or on a time card. Vanessa stared at him. That sounds rehearsed. It is not. Then you are either very brave or very careless. Daniel shook his head. Neither. I just have less interest in impressing people than I used to. Something about that answer irritated her. Maybe because she could not purchase the reaction she wanted. Maybe because he was already halfway out the door emotionally. What happened to you? She asked. Daniel's hand rested briefly on the handle of his case. Life. That is not an answer. It is the one I have time for. Vanessa stepped aside, but not before saying, You think you know me because I said one sentence. Daniel stopped. He turned back. No, ma'am. I think one sentence usually comes from a much longer story. For the first time, she did not have a reply ready. Daniel nodded toward the ballroom. Good night, Miss Reed. He walked away. Vanessa remained alone beneath the cold hallway lights, listening to the fading sound of his footsteps. 10 minutes later, she returned to the gala, smiled for photographs, thanked investors, and finished her speech without missing a line. But her confidence had developed a crack she could not explain. Near midnight, after the last guest left, she sat alone in her office overlooking downtown Chicago. On her desk was a photograph from 7 years earlier, face down beneath a stack of reports. Vanessa turned it over. Herself beside a man who had promised permanence and left with half the company's trust attached to his name. She stared at the picture for several seconds. Then Daniel's words returned with uncomfortable clarity. Hurt can teach lessons that are not always true. Vanessa set the photograph down. For the first time in years, she wondered whether the problem was that every man had been the same, or whether she had simply stopped believing anyone could be different. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Reed Dynamics before 7, carrying a paper cup of coffee in one hand and Emma's forgotten science folder in the other. He had driven 20 minutes back home after dropping her at school because she had left it on the kitchen table beside a bowl of cereal. By the time he reached the building again, the lobby was nearly empty. Vanessa was already there. She stood near the elevators in a charcoal suit, reading something on her phone with the concentration of someone trying not to think about something else. Daniel slowed. Good morning. Vanessa looked up. You came back. I work here. Her eyes dropped to the folder in his hand. What is that? My daughter's project. You bring homework to work now. Only when the student forgets it. Vanessa almost smiled. You drove home for that. She worked on it for 3 weeks. She could have learned a lesson. Daniel pressed the elevator button. She will. The lesson does not have to be humiliation. Vanessa looked at him more carefully. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. You always talk like that? She asked. Like what? Like everything has some moral hidden inside it. Daniel took a sip of coffee. No. Sometimes a folder is just a folder. The corner of her mouth moved. That was almost funny. I will try harder next time. The elevator rose quietly. Vanessa watched the floor numbers change. What is her project about? Water filtration. At 11? She likes solving problems people ignore. Vanessa glanced at him. Wonder where she gets that. Daniel looked over. Was that a compliment? Do not get used to it. I will write down the date. The doors opened on the executive floor. Vanessa stepped out, then stopped. Bring her by after school sometime. Daniel frowned. Why? We have an engineering lab. She might like it. He studied her face, searching for the joke. There was none. That is kind of you. Vanessa's expression tightened at the word kind, as though she trusted competence more easily than softness. It is practical. Of course. She walked away before he could say more. 3 hours later, Daniel was in the maintenance office when an urgent request came through. A conference room on the 32nd floor had lost power to its presentation system minutes before a major client meeting. Daniel grabbed his tools and headed upstairs. When he arrived, Vanessa was standing at the head of the table with 6 executives and 2 clients waiting. Perfect timing, she said. No pressure. Daniel set down his case. Pressure usually makes screws harder to find. One executive laughed nervously. Vanessa did not. We start in 8 minutes. Daniel opened the wall panel. He worked without rushing, tracing the fault through the control line. Vanessa paced once, then stopped herself. Can you fix it? Yes. How long? If nobody asks me every 30 seconds, less time. One executive looked horrified. Vanessa stared at Daniel. Then, unexpectedly, she said, everybody leave him alone. The room went quiet. For minutes later, the screen came back to life. The clients applauded lightly. Daniel closed the panel and stood. You are good at this, Vanessa said. It is my job. You say that a lot. Because people like making ordinary competence sound mysterious. She looked at him. You really do not want credit, do you? Daniel picked up his tools. Credit is useful when it helps someone. Otherwise, it is mostly noise. Vanessa watched him leave. Later that afternoon, she passed the lobby and saw Daniel outside through the glass doors. Emma had arrived from school, backpack hanging from one shoulder. She was talking fast, hands moving as she explained something. Daniel listened like there was nowhere else he needed to be. Vanessa stopped walking. Emma handed him a paper covered in red marks. Daniel looked at it, then smiled and tapped one line with his finger. Emma laughed. No lecture. No disappointment. Just attention. Vanessa stood there longer than she meant to. For years, she had told herself that men failed in predictable ways. They left. They lied. They chose themselves. Daniel Brooks was doing none of those things. Worse, he was not performing goodness for anyone. He did not even know she was watching. And that disturbed her more than if he had tried to impress her. 2 days later, Vanessa found Daniel in the engineering lab after 5 in the afternoon, standing beside Emma while she examined a clear plastic cylinder filled with gravel, charcoal, and cotton. It is supposed to filter dirty water, Emma said, carefully pouring a cloudy mixture through the top. Daniel leaned closer. And what happened last time? It still smelled weird. That is useful information. Emma frowned. Useful? It failed. Failure tells you what needs changing. Vanessa stopped just inside the doorway. Daniel noticed her first. Miss Reed. Emma looked up. You are the chief executive officer. Vanessa smiled. That is what they keep telling me. Emma held up the filter. Do you know about activated carbon? Vanessa walked closer. A little. Dad knows some. But he pretends he does not know everything, so I have to figure it out myself. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That is a very generous interpretation. Emma grinned. Vanessa watched them for a moment. There was no performance in Daniel's patience. No irritation hidden beneath the smile. Just attention. You can use the lab as long as you need, Vanessa said. Emma's eyes widened. Really? Really? Thank you. Daniel looked at Vanessa. That is more than practical. She held his gaze. Do not ruin it. Emma glanced between them, sensing something without understanding it. Dad says people ruin nice moments when they talk too much. Vanessa almost laughed. Your father has a lot of opinions. Only free ones. Daniel shook his head. I am being outnumbered. Later, after Emma left with a technician to wash the equipment, Vanessa remained near the lab window. The Chicago skyline glowed orange beyond the glass. She is a good kid, Vanessa said. Daniel packed the filter materials into a box. She works at it. You say that like being good is a skill. Sometimes it is. Vanessa looked down. My father used to say people show you who they are when there is nothing to gain. Daniel glanced at her. Sounds reasonable. He was wrong about my ex-husband. Daniel stopped packing. Vanessa rarely spoke about her private life. You do not have to explain. I know. That was why she continued. He was charming, patient, generous, until the company became valuable. Daniel said nothing. Then every conversation became leverage. Every promise became negotiation. When the marriage ended, I told myself I had missed the signs. Maybe you did. Vanessa looked sharply at him. That is comforting. You want comforting or honest? Apparently, I keep asking you for honest. Daniel closed the box. Missing signs does not mean you caused what happened. Vanessa's expression changed. And trusting the wrong person? Trust is not a character flaw. The lab grew quiet. Machines hummed softly behind the glass walls. Vanessa looked toward the empty work table. You make it sound simple. It is not simple. Then why do you say it like it is? Daniel rested both hands on the box. Because pain already complicates everything. Sometimes the truth should not. She turned toward him. And what truth did your wife leave you with? The question was gentle, but Daniel's face tightened. He looked out over the city. That I wasted too much time assuming there would always be more. Vanessa waited. Daniel continued. More mornings. More arguments to fix. More chances to say I was sorry. More ordinary Tuesdays. His voice remained steady, but the quiet behind it carried weight. When she got sick, suddenly every small thing mattered. Vanessa lowered her eyes. I did not know. Most people do not. Did losing her make you angry? Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. For a long time. At women. He looked directly at her. At life. Vanessa absorbed that. And you never turned it into a rule about everyone else. I tried not to. Why? Daniel glanced toward the doorway where Emma's laughter echoed faintly from the hallway. Because I did not want my daughter growing up believing bitterness was wisdom. Vanessa became very still. The sentence reached somewhere she had kept guarded for years. Before she could answer, Emma returned carrying the clean filter. Dad, I figured it out. Daniel smiled immediately. What did you change? Smaller charcoal layer. Slower flow. Vanessa watched his whole face soften as he listened. And something uncomfortable became clear to her. Daniel was not different because he had never been hurt. He was different because he had been hurt deeply and had still chosen not to make the world pay for it. The following Monday, Reed Dynamics woke to a problem that could not be fixed with a screwdriver. A major client had delayed a contract worth nearly $12 million, and by 8 in the morning, the executive floor was already tense. Vanessa stood at the head of the conference table while department leaders argued over numbers, deadlines, and blame. Daniel had only come upstairs because facilities had been asked to check the room's network ports. He worked quietly near the wall while voices sharpened behind him. We need to cut costs now, one executive said. Temporary staff first. Another nodded. Facilities can lose people too. Daniel's hand stopped for half a second. Vanessa looked at the financial report. How many positions? 37 immediately. More if the contract does not return. Daniel said nothing. He finished checking the connection and started packing his tools. Then he heard a name. Carlos Mendez is expendable. Daniel turned. Carlos had worked nights in building maintenance for 15 years. 2 children in college. A wife recovering from surgery. Reliable enough that everyone noticed only when something went wrong. He is not expendable, Daniel said. The room went silent. One executive frowned. Excuse me. Daniel looked toward Vanessa. You asked facilities for accurate information. That is accurate. Vanessa folded her arms. Go on. Daniel set his tool case down. Carlos maintains 3 systems that outside contractors charge almost twice as much to service. If you cut him, you save payroll for maybe 2 months and spend more replacing what he already does. The finance director shook his head. That is not your decision. No, sir. Then why are you speaking? Daniel remained calm. Because you are discussing people like line items without checking what they actually contribute. Vanessa watched him carefully. Do you have numbers? Yes. Bring them. 20 minutes later, Daniel returned with maintenance records, vendor estimates, overtime reports, and a handwritten comparison he had built over years simply because he believed somebody should know where money was being wasted. Vanessa read the pages slowly. Why has no one shown me this? Daniel glanced toward the executives. Nobody asked. The answer landed harder than accusation. Vanessa turned to the finance director. These vendor contracts renew quarterly? Yes. Then why are we cutting employees before renegotiating them? No one answered. She looked back at the reports. Freeze the layoffs. The room shifted. Vanessa, one executive said, we need immediate savings. Then find waste before you find families. Daniel looked at her. Their eyes met for only a moment. She had taken his argument and made it her decision without pretending it had been hers first. That mattered. By noon, 3 outside contracts were under review. By 3, The company had identified enough unnecessary spending to protect every threatened position for the quarter. Carlos found Daniel near the loading dock. I heard what you did. Daniel shook his head. I pointed at some numbers. Those numbers kept me working. Then keep doing good work. Carlos's eyes grew wet. My wife has another procedure next month. Daniel nodded. Then go home tonight and tell her the job is still there. Vanessa stood 20 feet away, unseen behind the open service door. She had come down to thank Daniel. Instead, she listened. No boasting. No request for recognition. No story about how he had saved everyone. Just quiet dignity. Later that evening, she found him alone in the break room, eating a turkey sandwich from a paper bag. You embarrassed my finance team today, she said. Daniel looked up. That seems to be becoming a pattern. Vanessa sat across from him. You could have made them look foolish. They were already scared. Scared people still make bad decisions. That does not mean they need humiliation. She studied him, even when they deserve it. Daniel folded the sandwich wrapper. Especially then. Vanessa leaned back. Why? He looked toward the darkened window. Because if the goal is to fix something, shame usually gets in the way. The room became quiet. Vanessa thought about her former husband, her boardroom, the gala, every sharp sentence she had used as armor. You really believe people can change? She asked. Daniel looked at her. I have to. Why? Because I am raising a daughter who watches what I become after disappointment. Vanessa lowered her eyes. For the first time, she understood that Daniel's kindness was not softness. It was discipline. And somewhere beneath all the anger she had carried for years, something she thought was gone began to move again. Not trust yet, but the possibility of it. Vanessa did not sleep much that night. Daniel's words followed her home, through the quiet of her penthouse, through the blue glow of financial reports she never really read, through the moment she poured herself coffee at 1 a.m. and realized she was still angry at a man who had been gone for 7 years. By sunrise, she had made a decision. Not a business decision. Something harder. She arrived at Reed Dynamics before most of the building was awake and found Daniel in the basement facilities room checking an air handling panel. You are difficult to find, she said. Daniel looked over. Most people try the directory. I did. Then it worked. Vanessa folded her arms. Do you enjoy making everything harder? Only conversations before 7. She almost smiled, then did not. I need to tell you something. Daniel set down his meter. All right. Vanessa looked at the concrete floor. The room smelled faintly of dust, coffee, and machine oil. Somewhere behind the wall, a ventilation motor hummed steadily. My ex-husband did not just leave. Daniel waited. He used information from inside the company to protect himself before our divorce became public. He moved accounts, took clients, turned people I trusted into witnesses against me. Daniel's face remained still. I am sorry. I was humiliated. I can understand that. No, you cannot. The words came sharper than she intended. Daniel did not flinch. Vanessa immediately looked away. I am sorry. You do not have to apologize for being angry. I do when I aim it at the wrong person. That surprised him. She continued. Afterward, I decided trust was weakness. I told myself men were predictable. Easier that way. Daniel leaned against the workbench. Easier than what? Vanessa swallowed. Admitting one man hurt me, and I let him define an entire half of the world. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was honest. Daniel said, that sounds like a lonely way to stay safe. Vanessa laughed once, without humor. It worked. Did it? She looked at him. He did not say more. He did not need to. You really hate letting people hide behind their own explanations, she said. I spent years doing it myself. After your wife? Daniel nodded. After Sarah died, I became very good at being busy. Work, bills, school pickups, groceries, anything that kept me from sitting still. And Emma? She noticed. Vanessa's expression softened. How? Daniel looked toward the old photograph taped inside his locker. A smiling woman with dark blonde hair, standing beside him, and a much younger Emma. One night she asked why I only talked about her mother when other people brought her up. Vanessa said nothing. She was 7. Daniel's voice dropped. 7 years old. And she was trying to teach me that silence can become another kind of absence. Vanessa studied him. What did you do? Started talking. About Sarah? About everything. Good memories. Hard ones. The parts one got wrong. You tell Emma you got things wrong? Daniel gave her a faint smile. She has eyes. Pretending otherwise would be inefficient. Vanessa smiled despite herself. For a few seconds, the distance between chief executive officer and facilities worker disappeared. There were only two people who had survived different kinds of loss and chosen different ways to carry it. Then Vanessa's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her expression changed. "What is it?" Daniel asked. "The delayed client contract." "Good news." "No," she answered. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When she ended the call, her face was pale. "They are walking away completely." Daniel straightened. "What does that mean?" Vanessa looked toward the ceiling as if she could see every employee above them. "It means the temporary savings will not be enough." "How bad?" "Bad enough that the board will demand layoffs by Friday." Daniel was quiet. Vanessa pressed her lips together. "And this time, I may not be able to stop them." He picked up his meter and closed the panel. "Then we do not start with what cannot be done." Vanessa looked at him. "What do we start with?" Daniel met her eyes. "Who needs protecting first?" Something shifted in her face. Not dependence. Not romance. Trust. Small, cautious, and real. "You would help me?" she asked. Daniel lifted his toolbox. "I work here." Vanessa shook her head. "That is not what I mean." He paused at the door. "I know." Then he looked back. "Yes." By Thursday morning, Reed Dynamics felt different. Not quieter, exactly. More careful. Word had spread that the board would meet at noon to decide whether 83 jobs would disappear by the end of the week. People still answered phones, carried coffee, checked inventory, and smiled at clients. But fear had settled beneath everything like cold air under a door. Daniel spent the first half of the morning moving between departments with a legal pad in his hand, asking questions nobody at the executive level had thought to ask. Which vendors could be delayed? Which systems were overserviced? Which teams were carrying duplicate software licenses? Which managers would volunteer reduced bonuses before asking hourly employees to lose paychecks? By 10, his pages were full. Vanessa found him in a conference room with Marcus from procurement, Lena from human resources, and two supervisors from operations. No titles on the whiteboard. Just numbers. "You started without me," she said. Daniel looked up. "You were in a board call." "I am still the chief executive officer." "Then you are welcome to sit anywhere." Lena hid a smile. Vanessa took the empty chair. "What do we have?" Daniel turned the legal pad toward her. "Possibilities. Not miracles." "How much?" Marcus answered. "If we renegotiate 3 vendor agreements, freeze executive travel, delay the lobby renovation, and reduce senior bonuses for 1 quarter, we protect 56 positions." Vanessa looked at Daniel. "And the other 27? "Still working on them." "The board will say those cuts are temporary." "They are." "They will say layoffs are cleaner." Daniel's expression did not change. "Cleaner for whom?" Vanessa looked down at the page. That question followed her all the way to the boardroom. At noon, 12 directors sat around a walnut table overlooking the Chicago River. The chairman, Robert Kessler, closed the financial packet and spoke first. 83 positions. Effective Monday. Vanessa folded her hands. "No," Kessler looked at her. "Excuse me. We have alternatives. We have delays. We have people." Another director sighed. "Vanessa, this is not personal." She looked at him. "That is exactly what people say when the consequences are personal for someone else." The room shifted. Kessler leaned back. "You are getting emotional." A month earlier, that sentence would have made her defensive. Today, it made her clear. "No, I am getting specific." She placed Daniel's numbers on the table. Vendor reductions. Deferred capital spending. Executive bonus cuts. Travel freeze. Software consolidation. One director scanned the sheet. "Who prepared this?" Vanessa paused. She could have said her team. She could have absorbed the credit and no one would have questioned it. Instead, she said, "Daniel Brooks in facilities started it. Procurement, human resources, and operations built it with him." Silence. Kessler frowned. "Facilities?" "Yes." "You are restructuring a company based on advice from maintenance?" Vanessa held his gaze. "I am restructuring based on good information. The source does not make the math less true." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the chief financial officer cleared his throat. "The numbers are sound." Another director nodded slowly. "We could buy 8 weeks." 12, Vanessa said. "If senior leadership gives up 20% of quarterly bonuses." Kessler stared at her. "Including yours?" "Starting with mine." That changed the room. Not because the amount would save the company. because sacrifice had finally moved upward. 2 hours later, the vote passed. No immediate layoffs. 12 weeks to recover the lost revenue or replace it. Vanessa left the boardroom exhausted but steady. Daniel was waiting near the elevator with his tool case. Well, he asked. Nobody loses a job Monday. He nodded once. Good. That is all you have. What do you want, confetti? She laughed despite herself. Then her face softened. They asked who made the plan. Daniel raised an eyebrow. And I told them. That was risky. Why? People like ideas better when they come from expensive offices. Vanessa looked at him. Maybe I am done rewarding that. Daniel studied her for a moment. Careful. You are starting to sound different. Maybe I am. The elevator doors opened, but neither moved immediately. Vanessa said, You protected people who may never know your name. Daniel looked toward the busy floor beyond them. They do not need my name. They need Friday to feel like Friday again. Her eyes held his. You know, I used to think kindness made people easy to use. Daniel stepped into the elevator. Only if kindness comes without boundaries. And yours? Mine has plenty. Vanessa stepped in beside him. The doors began to close. Good, she said quietly. I think I am finally learning the difference. Friday arrived with rain against the windows and a strange quiet across Reed Dynamics. Nobody had lost a job, but everyone knew the company had only bought time. 12 weeks. That was the number people whispered in elevators, at coffee machines, and across lunch tables. Vanessa heard it too. She spent the morning moving from meeting to meeting with a calm face and a mind that would not stop calculating. Revenue, contracts, payroll, trust. By noon, she had rejected 2 proposals that would have protected margins by cutting training and health benefits. By 2, the board chairman had called her judgment sentimental. By 3, she was standing alone in the executive conference room, staring at Chicago through sheets of gray rain. Daniel found her there while checking a faulty thermostat. You are supposed to knock, she said without turning. The thermostat did not answer. Very funny. Daniel opened the control panel. Vanessa watched him work. Robert says I am letting emotions run the company. Are you? I do not know anymore. Daniel looked over. That is probably a better answer than pretending you do. She folded her arms. You always make uncertainty sound respectable. Sometimes uncertainty is just honesty before a decision. Vanessa gave him a tired look. The board wants a new client strategy by Monday. If I fail, they may replace me. Daniel paused. Does that scare you? Of course it scares me. Good. Good. Means you still care about something besides winning. Vanessa looked away. You know what I used to care about? I assume you are going to tell me. Being impossible to disappoint. Daniel closed the thermostat panel. That sounds exhausting. It was efficient. Was it? She smiled faintly. You asked that too much. You answer it more now. Before she could respond, the conference room door opened. Robert Kessler entered with 2 directors behind him. His expression hardened when he saw Daniel. Facilities meeting, he asked. Vanessa straightened. Daniel was fixing the thermostat. Kessler glanced at the panel. Of course. The condescension was quiet but deliberate. Daniel picked up his tools. It is working now. Kessler barely looked at him. Good. Then perhaps the executives can handle the executive work. Daniel nodded once. Have a good afternoon. Vanessa watched him reach the door. Something in her tightened. A week earlier, she might have let it pass. Not now. Robert. Kessler turned. Yes. Vanessa's voice was calm. Do not speak to him that way. The room went still. Kessler blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. One director shifted uncomfortably. Kessler gave a thin smile. Vanessa, this is hardly worth making dramatic. Respect is not dramatic. Daniel stopped, but did not turn around. Vanessa continued. You questioned his job as if it determined his worth. It does not. Kessler looked at Daniel, then back at her. This is what I mean. You are becoming personally invested. Vanessa held his gaze. Maybe I am becoming personally accountable. No one answered. Daniel left quietly. Later that evening, Vanessa found him near the parking garage entrance, waiting beneath the awning while the rain eased. Emma was due to arrive in 10 minutes. You did not need to do that, Daniel said. Do what? Defend me. I was not defending you. No, I was correcting him. Daniel smiled. Important distinction. Vanessa stepped beside him. Cars hissed over wet pavement. For a while, neither spoke. Then she said, I owe you an apology. For what? For the gala. Daniel looked at her. You already apologized for being angry. Not for what I said. She took a breath. I turned pain into a principle. Then I used that principle to judge people I had never met. Daniel waited. Including you. Yes. Vanessa's voice softened. Especially you. He nodded once. All right. That is it. What else do you want? I do not know. Forgiveness, maybe. Daniel looked out at the rain. Forgiveness is not something you collect because you said the right sentence. Vanessa lowered her eyes. I know, but changing what you do next matters. She looked at him. I am trying. I can see that. The parking garage lights reflected in the wet concrete. Vanessa swallowed. I am still afraid I will trust the wrong person again. Daniel's voice was quiet. You might. She frowned. That is terrible reassurance. Trust is not certainty. Then what is it? A risk you take with boundaries. Vanessa stood very still. And second chances? Daniel glanced at her. Same thing. Headlights turned into the driveway. Emma waved from the passenger seat of a friend's car. Daniel raised his hand back. Vanessa watched his face soften instantly. Then she said, almost to herself, maybe I have been waiting for people to prove they would never hurt me. Daniel looked at her. Nobody can prove that. So what can they prove? He picked up his tool bag as Emma approached. How they behave when they have the chance to. Vanessa watched him walk toward his daughter. And for the first time in years, the possibility of trusting someone did not feel like surrender. It felt like courage. Monday morning came with clear skies over Chicago and a room full of people who remembered exactly what Vanessa had said at the gala 1 week earlier. The quarterly leadership meeting was being held in the same Grand Meridian ballroom, though this time there were no champagne glasses, no applause cues, and no carefully staged jokes. Department heads, managers, and several board members filled the tables. Daniel was there only because facilities had been asked to monitor the audiovisual system. He stood near the rear wall with a tablet in one hand, checking levels while Emma sat quietly at a small table beside the engineering team, finishing homework before school. Vanessa stepped onto the stage and looked out across the room. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she placed her notes on the podium and pushed them aside. Last week, I said something in this room that I believed was strength. The room became still. Robert Kessler looked up from his folder. Daniel stopped moving. Vanessa continued. It was not strength. It was pain wearing confidence. A few people shifted in their seats. I said that men were all the same. Her eyes moved toward the back of the ballroom. I was wrong. No one laughed this time. I had taken one betrayal, then another disappointment, then years of fear, and turned them into a rule. Rules can feel safe. They can also become unfair. Daniel lowered his tablet. Vanessa looked toward him. A man in this room challenged me without insulting me. He did not try to embarrass me. He did not ask for credit. He simply refused to let my pain become evidence against people who had done nothing to earn my distrust. Every face turned toward Daniel. He looked uncomfortable immediately. Vanessa almost smiled. Daniel Brooks would probably prefer that everyone stop looking at him. A few soft laughs broke the tension. Emma grinned. Daniel shook his head. Vanessa continued. But this is not about making him a hero. It is about admitting that respect should not depend on title, salary, office, gender, or whether someone can do something impressive for us. Robert's expression tightened, but he remained silent. Over the past week, Daniel helped this company protect jobs, question waste, and think more carefully about how we treat people when we are afraid. She paused. But the most important thing he changed was not a budget. Daniel looked at her now. He reminded me that kindness can have boundaries. That dignity can be quiet. That second chances are not weakness. The ballroom was silent enough to hear the air system above the chandeliers. Vanessa took a breath. So I want to correct what I said. She looked directly at Daniel. Men are not all the same. Then she looked across the room. Neither are women. Neither are leaders. Neither are people who have been hurt. Her voice softened. And neither are second chances. No applause came immediately. That made the moment stronger. People simply sat with it. Daniel gave the smallest nod. Vanessa returned it. 3 months later, Reed Dynamics had replaced the lost contract with 2 smaller partnerships and restored the executive bonuses only after hourly staff received their scheduled raises. Robert remained chairman, but he stopped referring to facilities as if it were invisible. Carlos's wife recovered well from her procedure. Emma's water filtration project won second place at the City Science Fair, though she insisted the judges had misunderstood her charcoal design. Vanessa attended the fair anyway. She stood beside Daniel beneath fluorescent school gym lights, holding a paper cup of terrible coffee while Emma explained filtration rates to anyone who would listen. She gets this from you, Vanessa said. Daniel looked at his daughter. The stubborn part. The part that keeps working when something fails. He smiled. That might be both of us. Vanessa became quiet. I used to think trusting again meant forgetting what happened. Daniel shook his head. It means remembering without letting it choose everything for you. She looked at him. You always have one more sentence, do you? Usually. Annoying. I have been told. Emma called from across the gym. Dad, Miss Reed, come see this. Vanessa looked at Daniel. Miss Reed, give her time. They walked over together. Nothing dramatic happened. No grand confession. No sudden promise. Just three people standing around a plastic water filter while a child explained why patience mattered. Sometimes redemption does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it sounds like ordinary conversation under cheap gym lights. Sometimes respect grows before romance has a name. And sometimes the sentence that changes everything is not the loudest one in the room. It is the quiet reply that makes someone finally question the story they have been using to protect themselves.